All right, hello everyone, and welcome to a discussion of the book that held her heart. This is, look at these books. Aren't they beautiful? This is book three of the library trilogy, which began with The Book That Wouldn't Burn. And book two is, of course, The Book That Broke the World. And book three, we have here The Book That Held Her Heart. We are thrilled that this trilogy has now come to completion. The three of us have read it and are ready to share our thoughts. I'm going to ask my friends here, Marianne Guevara from the channel Marianne Guevara, and Jarrod from the Fantasy Thinker, to first give their non-spoiler thoughts on the trilogy as a whole, focusing maybe especially on the finale. And then we are going to dive into spoilers. I've already released my own spoiler-free video review essentially on it, so you can hear whatever I wanted to say there if you want. But this is mainly going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. We will start out spoiler-free in case there's somebody here who just wanted to hear some more spoiler-free thoughts. So, Marianne, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me to the discussion.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm excited to hear what you think and your thoughts on it. And Jarrod, same to you. It's always great to chat with you, my friend.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. I always enjoy these things, and yeah, and this book is enjoyable as well. So,
Yeah.
and it's very nice to meet Marianne for the first time on screen.
Oh, you two have not been in a discussion previously.
No.
Not
Oh,
yet, so this
okay.
is it. Yeah,
All
great.
right. All right. Well, let's awesome. That's another great thing about these discussions is they bring us together, right? So all right, let's go with you first though, Marianne. What are your spoiler-free thoughts on the library trilogy as a whole, but focusing on the book that held her heart?
Well, for the book that held her heart, when I started reading it, I felt that it's definitely chaotic. I, it has such a breakneck pace to it.
Mhm.
So I was kind of just flying through it. You're, don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, it's, there is a chaos to the book that held her heart. And I don't think this is spoiling, but things are quickly unraveling, and you do get a sense that we are on a deadline. Like we are quickly rushing to a conclusion. And for me, while I was reading, I had such a hard time, you know, trying to figure out or anticipate what was going to be the end to this
Uh-huh.
book and to this series because I knew that Mark Lawrence, he mentioned that this was going to be a tearjerker of a book. So, kind of expecting that there were going to be some sad moments.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was my first impression was the fact that it was just so chaotic and it was just so fast. But similar to the first two books, there's a lot of heartfelt moments in here, very poignant moments. This series delves into the power of knowledge
Mm.
and the abuse of knowledge and the way that humanity kind of struggles, what path should we follow when we are dealing with knowledge? What is the correct path that we should take? And I think Lawrence does a great job of pointing out and explaining that this is a very difficult question. It's not a very easy one. And I really like how all the characters, you do get a sense that none of these characters are on top. Like they don't have a clear or, foolproof answer to the question that the story that Lawrence is proposing. And as you're reading the book, and you're trying to figure out an answer for yourself to this question, you feel that the characters are also doing so.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, similar to, I mean, I do feel that this third book is very much just it is a continuation of those first two books, just with that rapid pace, but with that poignant discussion. So,
Mm-hmm.
very enjoyable. And yeah, I was just eager to get through it and see what the conclusion that Lawrence and our characters, would come to, because I had no idea what to expect, honestly.
Yeah. I love what you just said. You said so many great things there, but Mark Lawrence continuously astounds me with his ability to write a book that is both thought-provoking and yet so fast-paced.
Hmm.
And that's a rare combination. Normally, when you have a fast-paced book, it's not one that really necessarily sticks with you, makes you ponder. But in his case, this is a trilogy that introduced some real, just for me, very deep, awe-inspiring moments in terms of my view of humanity and who we are and what we've been and where we're going. And I just so appreciate that while I'm eagerly, you know, tossing the pages aside as I'm trying to get through the story, like you said. I mean, it's amazing. It's just such a rare thing. I have lots of authors that I love who make me think deeply, but usually they're much longer books. And I have lots of authors that I love because they entertain me, and I can't wait to turn the page and all that. But the combination is rare, and also the combination of an author who makes me laugh and cry in the same book is fairly rare too. But so anyway, thank you so much, and Jared, let's hear your non-spoiler assessment of the book that held her heart.
Yeah, well, it's hard to follow that, but I echo many of Marianne's thoughts on this book. I did find that like I couldn't put it down. I had that feeling of not wanting to put it down because of the uh, the s- the s- the action and the pacing just seemed to lend itself to literal page turning, one after the other. I read this book probably quicker than I've read any other book this year,
Wow.
and so, but the thing about it was despite of it being a thrill ride, it's not just a thrill like you've been saying. It's this prose is sprinkled with like all this fantastic philosophical insight and some heavy themes like you've been saying, and some of the themes carry over from the previous volumes, but there's also some new ones introduced in here too, I think. And um the like one of the things that runs through this book is comparing uh books to people almost. You can't judge them by the cover. They're not always what they seem. They're different the next time you run across them. And those that kind of theme just pops up. Um and uh and just, of course, the technology thing you guys have mentioned already. And whether it's dangerous to know too much or whether it's dangerous not to know uh too much. And the but I like how he brought up um how society has a bad habit of setting up situations that absolve individuals of personal responsibility,
Hmm.
and that came into play in this book in particular. And how there's and the challenge of overcoming binary arguments, you know, seeking a third, a fourth, or even more ways to solve problems rather than just this or that. And I thought that was very powerful in this book here.
Yeah.
And and there was also another. And of course, there was a big theme of granting forgiveness rather than holding on to a vengeance.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot jam packed into these pages, and it's only a 350-page book or so.
Yeah.
And and you would think with all that stuff in there wouldn't be much room for character, but there's tons of character in this book,
Yeah.
tons of character building. And I really love these characters. I fell in love with them again in this third book and learned to love other ones that I might not have liked before. And I just how he did that was quite clever, I think, and very, very well done.
Totally agree with you. I love what you said about people being like books, and to extend that a little bit, the library that is featured in this library trilogy is in a way a giant metaphor for humanity, isn't it? humanity as a whole, complete with all of our aspirations and our achievements and our failures, our potential. Just like Marianne said about knowledge, it's both a glorious and a dangerous thing, because we have used it for creativity and we've used it for destruction. So that is just one of the, as I was reading and had to pause a couple times just to appreciate the depth of and the aptness of this metaphor that is at the heart of this trilogy, the idea that this infinite library is a reflection of humanity, and the observations that Mark Lawrence was able to put forward were, I think, very powerful as a result of this central metaphor. But any other non-spoiler thoughts from either of you before we dive into spoilers?
Um, oh, there's one thing that I did want to mention, and uh, I just, I mean, you get it throughout the series, but I think especially in this third book, just the joy and the love that Lawrence has for reading, for books,
Yeah.
especially. I mentioned in my review that this book felt like an ode to, you know, librarians, to readers, to, just books in general. Anyone who holds books and reading in such a high regard,
Hmm.
you know, you get that sense while you're reading it, like this is reading, or rather, I mentioned in my video that the abuse of knowledge or the abuse of reading, like Lawrence almost treats it like sacrilegious. Like it's a horrible thing
Hmm.
when the way that people mistreat or even destroy or attempt to destroy knowledge. It's a
Hmm.
horrific thing with horrific consequences throughout humanity. So, yeah, I just really like especially towards the end, you get a feeling that, this is a book that is speaking to, lovers of the word.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lawrence's prose, while you're on that topic of that, I think is actually, it's interesting because I feel like his writing is some of the most quotable writing that is out there. There's so many great Mark Lawrence quotes, and that makes me think, okay, there's something really, it's not a kind of in your face, I'm so beautiful kind of prose at all. It's very accessible and very functional, and yet he has a way with words. He has a way of putting something, and you just think that is the best way anyone could have said that. That is just a perfect encapsulation of that idea in words. I just find that he has a gift for that, really. There's some great quotes, and
Hmm.
not just in the actual pages and the chapters, but in the epigraphs as well.
Mm-mm.
Some of which he's entirely made up, and some of which actually come from other places, like Josiah Bancroft's The Books of Babel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arm
Yeah.
of the Sphinx. Yes, I saw that.
Yep. So anyway, I just think that's definitely worth remarking on, and I didn't mention that
Oh
in
yeah.
the review either, but I love his prose. Any final non-spoiler
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I also think he has a way of, like you said, articulating um, those quotes, those quotable passages through the characters without making it seem forced through the
Uh-huh.
characters. It's a natural progression that the characters are doing. That those quotable sections that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let us now. This is the warning for anyone who has not read the book that held her heart. I'm actually going to start with a sort of non-spoiler thing, but it will probably lead quickly into spoilers. But we'll consider this the official warning for spoilers. And now let's talk about what happens in the book, beginning with the first part where we're introduced to a brand new character named Anne. And it quickly becomes apparent that we're looking at the early stages of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. And I think it's our world, although you never know with this
Yeah.
multiversal kind of
Yeah.
uh, setup that he's got here. Maybe it's a world that's very similar to ours, but isn't exactly, who knows? But
Familiar enough, yeah.
it's
Yeah,
it's it's the Holocaust for sure.
Yeah.
And
mm,
uh, the question I mentioned in my spoiler-free review is, I can imagine some readers would question the appropriateness of including the Holocaust in a fictional trilogy like this, and the idea that I, I don't think came out of nowhere actually, because we've been getting epigraphs from our world in the first two
mm,
books, and thematically speaking, this series has a lot
mm.
that you could say links it to an historical event like the Holocaust. But obviously, if you're going to write about the Holocaust, you have to be very respectful and circumspect, and ultimately, I personally came to the conclusion that Mark Lawrence was indeed very respectful and careful, and also I think he made the parts of this that are about the Holocaust very thematically resonant with the rest of the narrative going on. And so for me, it worked, but I could understand a reader who's uneasy or questions, oh, I don't know, is this do you see what I mean? I just wanted to hear your thoughts are on, and then we can segue from that to Anne, which I ended up loving the character. And I think it's not accidental that he named her Anne either. And although she's a different Anne, obviously. But it's, at first I wondered, oh, is this the Anne? And it wasn't, but maybe there's some similarities. A young, a girl of similar age. I'm talking about Anne Frank, of course.
Mm.
Mm.
But it's not Anne Frank. But maybe there are some resemblances, perhaps. But anyway, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the inclusion of the Holocaust in the book that held her heart. Did it surprise you? Do you feel like it fit? Was it something that you just, what are your thoughts on it? Either one of you want to go first?
Uh, okay, I guess
Go.
I'll start.
Yeah.
So I actually did enjoy the inclusion of Anne's perspective. I was wondering, because we got in the book that broke the world, we got Kelcha's perspective. Like with each new installment, we got a new sort of like POV.
Right.
So I was expecting a different POV in this one.
Huh.
I didn't expect it to be from our world, but I do like that it was because, as you mentioned, I do think it fits very well, thematically
Hmm.
within the series because, of course, you had the whole book burning with the Nazis. They
Yep.
Mm.
did that. And uh, I'm sorry, I'm actually kind of going to reference the end a bit here.
Oh, we're
And
doing spoilers, so go
yeah,
for it.
so
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
so
for it. Yeah.
I thought it was really touching that Anne was the one who kind of helped bring about the conclusion
Yeah.
and to the answer that everyone was kind of struggling with of
It's a
whether
brilliant
or
ending.
not, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, whether or not we should, just share knowledge or we should just make sure that no one can obtain it. I find it, I mean, Anne, she goes through the Holocaust, she's been through the camps, and then when we find her again towards the end, she's talking to the class about her experiences in those camps and how horrific it is. And you would think when you have someone who has gone through such dehumanizing conditions, like the most like horrible thing you can go through, you'd think that they'd never want to talk about it ever again. They don't want to reference it. They don't want to think about it. But here, Anne, you know, it's like a duty. Like she has to do this. She has to go to these classes. She has to tell these kids, the coming generations, what happened to her, what happened to her people. It's a knowledge. She is sharing knowledge, and it's something horrific, but it is something that has to be told. It can't be kept away from people. People cannot be ignorant of it. And it fits with, the big question that the characters were dealing with, whether or not, this knowledge that can cause great harm and also do good should be kept away or it should be shared. And shows, especially which brother was it?
Mayland, you're probably thinking Mayland.
Mayland, yeah, Mayland, who was the one struggling with it. I think he's amazed by the fact that someone who has gone through so much suffering, who is the victim of so much, pain, you know, feels the need to share.
Hmm.
Feels the need to share this horrific, knowledge that humanity, any species is capable of doing. So I do love the fact that we're introduced to her and she comes back in this capacity at the end. So yeah, I really liked Anne's POV.
That's really well said. And I think it's important. Of course, Mayland is the one, the Kenneth who was all for the destruction of the library, the destruction of knowledge. So Anne really delivers a very important perspective to Mayland. And Carol, I think, is present there as well. And the effect that her story has on them is, of course, really, really important. And in terms of the resolution that we get here at the end of it all. But I want to hear Jarrod's thoughts on the inclusion of the Holocaust and Anne as a POV, and then we can talk more specifically about her arc, her journey through the book.
Yeah, I think the like you said, we've been getting hints of little snippets of our world here and there all along the way, and I don't know if anybody has read some of the short stories that go along with this
I
trilogy.
haven't.
They also reference our world as well. So,
Okay,
um,
nice.
so they're and they're nice. They're nice to read. But the uh, the main thing that I think the Holocaust in here is important because it relates to the Holocaust that's already kind of happened in book two as well, and who was responsible for that. And um, that was Malin, right? If I'm not, am I remembering correctly?
He,
Yeah,
he
Mayland and then the other
And
brother.
the other brother, yeah,
I
the
forgot the
uh,
name.
assassin brother.
yes,
They
yes,
engineered
they
this,
engineered,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
yeah, and
by
so
manipulating Kelka and her brother Helet. Yeah.
that's correct, yeah,
Mm.
and so because of
Starval. Yeah.
Starvold, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
because of their actions, it resonates so powerfully with the actions of the Holocaust going on in our real world, the and so and I really like the introduction of Anne because I mean she's naturally likable in the beginning because she's very intelligent and she has this curiosity, and she's running into characters we know who they are, but it's fun to see her come to grips with these guys not quite who they seem to be, and they aren't human. And once their glamour starts fading, she's seeing more and more of this. But I think what makes her character extremely powerful is her refusal to go with them.
Yes.
And I
She could have,
Yes,
think that
yes.
could have
was
escaped.
one of
Yeah.
the strongest decisions that any character could have made in this book
Mm.
at
Mm.
that point, because she could have easily gone on this grand adventure and possibly saved herself a lot of pain and trauma. We don't know what would have happened on the adventure, but the but the uh but the possibilities were endless if she would have went with them, and she stayed behind, and she had the wisdom to say, no, my place is here
Yeah.
and I need to deal with this. And that that showed a strength at the time that made me think there's got to be a resolution to this when we get towards the end.
Mm.
It was, but I knew there had to be something tied into that decision that would relate to whatever happens in the rest of the book near the end. And I just thought he brought that about wonderfully, because what she says to Malin and um, Carol at the end there was something like magic is all around you if you wait long enough to see it happen. and I thought that was a beautiful line. And so there was so her character really just yeah, that really hit a chord with me. I really enjoyed reading about her.
Good, good. Yeah, I thought it was very effective in the end, and I also appreciate that we didn't just have the character Anne obviously is Jewish, which is why her family is being persecuted. And we saw that horrible, horrible moment when her male relatives were all being rounded up. Uh, just traumatizing. And of course, her being torn in that moment and being held back because, of course, what would she have been able to do in that moment, to save them? And of course, we get the other groups of people who were being persecuted, the others, let's say, of this society, the
Yes.
people who have been chosen by the Nazis, by Hitler, by the leaders who are bringing this nation into a very dark place. So you saw the persecution of the gay couple in the same town who were the other bookshop. You saw
Right.
and you just knew that the woman who has the disability also.
Mm.
I
Yes.
forget her name, but she comes from the aristocratic family, and she has the other bookshop, which eventually Anne takes over that bookshop uh,
Right.
by the end. And these are all groups of people that we're focusing on here, and it's no accident that they own bookshops. First of all, we like them because they own bookshops. That's an automatic like, from readers like us. But also they're sympathetic, and we realize that these are not all the groups that were persecuted by the Nazis, but they are prominent groups that were, and somehow we get just in this town, this microcosm. I think a very pretty thorough, and though it's brief, it's not the biggest portion of the book, but it's a pretty thorough psychological exploration of the dynamics happening during the Holocaust in terms of the othering and the fear and the hatred and the violence that is then twisted into a supposed virtue. Like if you do these horrible things to these people, these dehumanized others, then you become virtuous according to that society. Although deep down, I think most people know when they're doing something horrible, they're indulging their worst selves in a sense, but they are given permission to do that in a time like that, in a way that's very ugly and frightening. So. Yeah. Any further thoughts on Anne, though, and her journey in this book, Marianne?
Uh, Nothing much. I mean, I do like how Jared mentioned, I think the important part, she decided to stay because a part of me was wondering, like, is she going to leave with Ute and Carol?
Yeah.
Because that's usually what happens in, fantasy novels. Character
Yeah.
from our world goes off, has an adventure in a fantasy world, but no, she stays. She understands like my place is here, and she says goodbye.
Hmm.
So it was really that part was very impactful, and yeah, I knew that okay, we've got to see Anne again. At some point we've got to return to her
Yeah.
for sure. It's like this can't be the end to Anne's POV.
Yeah. And I think also it was an important distinction. I think she had a kind of a parallel to Livera,
Oh,
but
yes.
I think it would have been too much if she went with them. She would have
Mm,
done because Livera went on the adventure. She
Right.
she went on, she went there. She continually went on the adventure, one after the another, and still is in this book even. And the Anne's differentiation was because they were both young girls or young
mm.
women, and
Sure.
that differentiation between her and Anne, I think, was a needful distinction in their character.
Though I will say they would have been good friends, I think, if they had
Sure.
ever met. Well, you brought up Ute and Carol, and Carol is a favorite for me and throughout, but I got to like him more and more with each book, I think. And his decision to side with Ute at the
Mm.
end of the book that broke the world was a bit of a surprise to me. So he's the one sibling, if we can call them that, the Kenneth family that grew up in the library together. And I love how Evar keeps insisting that they're a family, even though he's told by I think it was Starval or Mayland, one or the other or both. We're not a real family, and we just happen to be stuck together inside this. And he said, "Well, that's what a family is, right?" I love that line. But anyway, let's talk about Carol and Ute. And Ute, he makes an ultimate sacrifice in here, doesn't he? He gives
Yeah.
up his life, a very long life, but ultimately he makes it possible for that resolution at the end. He provides through with his own blood the portal that allows Lavira and the others to get where they need to go to unite with Kelka at the heart of things, at the center of this library, if you will. So, any thoughts on the journey of Ute and or Carol, and yeah, any thoughts at all in terms of their perspective here? Because of course they're on the side of let's see, it's Irad who wants to keep the library to preserve the library, or is it Jaspeth?
I think it's Irad that wants to keep it, and
Yeah.
Jaspeth wants to destroy it.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and
they're
then
trying to enact the will of Iraq.
compromise. The one you
Oh,
wants
they're the
compromise.
compromise. Correct.
Yeah.
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 And it's actually Ute's daughter and Lavira, who's
Who's
with her,
yeah,
who are the
Irad.
trying to enact the will of Irad. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then of course Jaspeth is very prominently represented by, especially Mayland, but he's got
Mm,
Starval in his camp, and I mean, they happen to have sort of kidnapped Evar,
yeah.
um,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I don't think that. The sister is Clovis is particularly invested in the conflict so much, but she's with their group as well. So she wants to save Arpix. We got to talk about
Yeah.
that.
We need yeah, we
But
definitely.
thoughts on Ute and Carol? Anyone?
Jared, go first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course, he's one of our one of my favorite returning characters, and he but he kind of moves beyond the role he had in the first two books, where he was kind of this mentor figure, and he was kind of like the all-knowing wizard. Really, he was kind of the Gandalf of the story almost. And in this book, he kind of moves beyond that role, and he's taking more of an action. He's trying to look for means to bring about a, another choice besides destruction or
Right.
preservation. And so his dilemma is front and center in this book, and it really sets up the fact that he's going to sacrifice himself in
Mm.
order to bring about this ideal he wants, this compromise, this fact that there's more to this this conflict than just black or white decision. And he uses our world in order to give an example of that, because in our world we don't have this central
Mm,
all-encompassing library. We have knowledge stored here and over there and over there, and it's chaotic and it's messy, but um, it's also a means of disseminating knowledge that the world he's used to doesn't it doesn't apply. Like on his world, everything goes to the library to get the knowledge they need to either uh, do something good or do something bad. And the way that we have it here on Earth, you realizes that it's it's not always about doing something good or bad. It is so many ways of dissemination that the cycles of good and bad and evil and stuff like that just they cycle more often, and they're not as they're gray. They're very gray. They're not as black and white. And there's a lot of room for growth and learning because of that. Instead of because in the previous books we learned that there was plenty of basically apocalypses that wiped things out, and then it started again, and then and that kept happening because of the knowledge found in the library, and so he thinks he sees a better way for that kind of dissemination of knowledge on our world, or the familiar world that we're seeing here, and I think that's part of it's a big revelation for him and his party and his characters that are surrounding him in this story here.
Mm, great. Awesome. Marianne.
Well, I agree. I completely agree with Jared because I did see you in the first two books. He was sort of that Gandalf figure. He's the the elder that you kind of that the characters like go to for knowledge, to know what to do. And I love how in this book, when him, Carol, and Anne are in the library and they're facing off, I think one of what do they call it? The ones that come out of the machine. Oh, what do they call it? The
Oh,
escapes, I think. Yeah,
Escapes,
that's what they're called.
escapes, yeah, yeah.
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 When they're fighting it, like once they've done that, he basically admits that he doesn't know. He doesn't have an answer. Like
Right.
he admits to Kara, like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I just came through the portal and it led me here, and I'm just trying to learn along the way. So I really like that. It kind of turns that the trope of that all that wise, all-knowing elder figure, and because I think it's a situation in this book in the series where the problem is just so complex. It's just grown larger than any character can handle on his or her own.
Hmm.
And then another thing that Jared mentioned, the at the end, knowledge is now disseminated. It's no longer held in that in one hub. And I like the idea they mentioned at the end that not only the books or the knowledge has been disseminated, but the magic as well. Like the magic is sort of diluted. So there's like little bits of magic. Like when you go into a bookstore or you go into a library, there is a little bit of magic there. When you're going through the stacks, when you're picking out books. And another thing that the dissemination of knowledge does is that it encourages people to go out and seek more knowledge. So like, before with the library in their world, you just go to the library, just that one hub, and you go there. And what ended up happening is that because it's all in one place, you had when different species were coming in, they would block off certain sections. So like in this one hub, now you have all these different, cornered off sections of knowledge that other people can't get at anymore. Well, now you have different places of knowledge, and you are encouraged now to kind of go out and seek it. You don't just expect it to be in one place. And I think that's, in our world, when you are trying to learn about something, it is good to seek out different sources, to seek out different perspectives. So I really like how that idea is sort of reflected in the end, in the conclusion that they come to,
Mm,
that, knowledge will not be destroyed, but it won't be kept in one singular place. It will be something that is owned by everyone, everywhere. And it is just up to you to go out and seek it for yourself. So
yeah.
I really like what Lawrence did with that towards the end.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love what you guys were saying about Ute being a mentor figure, a Gandalf type character, and it is the function just archetypally of such a character to point a protagonist in the right direction, to help them along the way, push them along, and eventually get out of the way, usually by dying. So if you think of Obi-Wan and Star Wars, dying while fighting Darth Vader, but giving Luke that push that he needed in order to put him on the pathway to becoming a Jedi, or Dumbledore and Harry Potter, sorry for these spoilers, guys, but I think everybody knows, right? Uh, you get the idea. Ute literally dies in this story while but providing a pathway to Lavira and the others. He makes that it's a sacrifice, but it's also him providing this path to them in order to accomplish their ultimate goal. So he really performs the archetypal function of a mentor figure here. And we do see him go from almost like seemingly all-knowing wizard to vulnerable, right? And that made him actually, for me, in this book, a much more relatable character in a way. That vulnerability we saw at the end, honestly, of the book that broke the world when he loses his spouse. I think that's a real kick for him, and we see his sorrow there. And also, he seems to have realized that he's messed things up with his daughter in some way, and feels bad about that. So that disagreement is something also that makes it hard for him. But we see how much she loves him when she realizes he's about to make this sacrifice, and how distressed she is and tries to stop him. So there was definitely love there. We saw that in that moment. But yeah, I thought he was a brilliant character. Let's move on to another set of characters, though, in the interest of time. So another grouping we have here are those who are trying to carry out the will of Jaspeth, and that would include, as most particularly Mayland, but he has recruited Starval into his camp firmly, while Evar's been more or less kidnapped. He's just trying to get back with Levira,
Yeah.
and of course Clovis is there, and she's really just trying to get back with Arpix. So thoughts on that particular group, guys? Any of those characters that you'd like to comment on, and particular moments that stand out to you, things that you want to talk about? Who wants to go first?
Oh, that betrayal. Uh,
Oh, you
uh,
mean Starval and
yeah,
Oh, I did not
when
see
he
that coming.
when he stabbed Eva, yeah, I didn't see that coming either, and that was just like,
he stabbed
what?
him in the back,
I'm like,
Yeah.
literally.
what?
It's like you wouldn't do that. And he
He
did, he
stabbed
did it.
me. Yeah.
That's He's like, I'm your brother. What are you doing?
That whole dynamic was brilliant, I think.
Oh yeah,
And Evar's attempt to um, help Starval find his, it's the wrong word here, but humanity, right? To help
Mhm.
him find the compassion that is missing from him because he's been traumatized, right? I like that dynamic a lot between those two. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you, Jarrod. Yeah.
no, that was yeah, it was interesting because I don't know, they seem to have because they're going through this journey, and it's just this big journey of discovering basically who they are as relatives to each other, even though they're not biologically related technically, but they grew up together, they're brothers, they always called each other brothers, and they're kind of refinding that as the story goes on, and that which makes Stavel's betrayal at that moment so heart wrenching. Um, it leads to, of course, what eventually um, is Eva's, uh, kind of death at the at the end.
Part of it.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, he's
he's
been shot too, of
he's
course.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
been shot and all that stuff, but that didn't help. And um, so it was really interesting how that all came about, and I don't quite remember. I'm trying to remember because the other group was Clovis and
Arpix. Like they got
Arpix.
reunited.
Yeah,
They got
they got
reunited, but
reunited.
Clovis was initially with Sarval and Nayland.
Yeah, they all got split up
Yeah, they all got split
when
up.
they
Yeah,
yeah, when they get to enter the portal.
yeah, and
It's pretty chaotic at times.
it
Yeah.
is pretty chaotic at times because they,
Oh gosh.
especially
Yeah.
with that the Arpix bringing the book into the machine. That
Right.
was crazy because that's when it really just like the
It
whole
went, yeah.
book just went. What is going to happen now? I had no idea. You know.
Yeah. It's horrible because like Levira warns him, don't bring it to the mechanism. But
He
he
doesn't hear the
doesn't
whole
he
message.
doesn't hear it. So
He
it's
only
like,
hears
oh no.
bring mechanism, right?
Mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay,
you're,
so she
you're
wants
breaking
me to
up.
bring it to dang it.
Oops.
Yeah, that's the thing with this book, because time and space is just completely fluid. Like everyone's meeting each other through space and time, and oh my gosh, like you're trying to keep up like where everyone is, and
Or like
I
when
think the part.
Arpix dies. Arpix
Oh my
is
God,
king.
that's the part. That's the part that freaked me out. I was like, oh my God. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. Lawrence, first you did Milan. Okay, now you have to get rid of Arpix. And I was like, oh great. And then the next chapter with Clovis, and then you realize, oh, okay. So it's the multiverse. We just saw like an alternate version of
Yeah.
Arpix just dying. But I thought that, Lawrence was just prepared to like, life is tough. It sucks. You're not gonna get there in time. Because realistically, technically, realistically, what are the chances that she's gonna come in the at the right moment when he needs saving? So I was like, yeah, that
Yeah.
part. When I finished that part, I was like, ah, dang it, Lawrence.
I was like, what the frick did you just do?
Oh,
Wait, you can't do that.
no way, no
You
way.
can't do art picks like that. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
and then of course immediately realized, oh, okay, or not immediately, but
Mm,
it was really with Clovis's chapter, and you realize, oh, okay, that's what we're. But in that particular reality, art picks did bite the bullet there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. But we end up learning that there's all kinds of different ways that King Owen all dies, and
yeah,
and and
and in
but
some versions, he's not quite half so
he,
bad, right?
yeah.
he's only a normal jerk instead of instead of a crazy jerk. but um, but it was Eva who pointed out to Malin and Starville that they you know they are the ones who basically committed a genocide, and he reinforced that fact to them, and kind of like, this is what you did. You need to deal with this. You need to, this is not good. And finally Starval says, like, I have regrets, and that's kind of a turning point, um after the I think
We
that
do
was
have a
after the
kind of
stabbing.
rehabilitation of him, and
Mhm.
even
Yeah.
ultimately of Mayland, who
Yeah, yeah.
once a year comes to see Lavira, at the end, and seems to have apologized in his own way.
Yeah, but it took a while. But
It took a long while.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I thought that particular journey was really well done, and of course there's a lot of sundered paths and characters going off on their own and all of that, and ultimately a very satisfying for me part of this because of what happens. We'll talk about this last. I think we'll save Lavira and Evar for last,
Mhm.
but because of what happens to them, I did find a lot of satisfaction in our picks and Clovis, ultimately.
Yeah.
Like at least we got one happy
Yeah,
romance,
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
right?
That's my exact thought. At least we have them. At least
Right.
we're good with those two.
Yeah. And that was there was a obviously there's a level of a kind of comedic effect there because you have this Clovis who is so formidable and frightening even, and you have Arpix who is a bookworm and a gentle soul, but what I love about Lawrence and pretty much any great writer is that it's in the relationships between these characters that where they cross these barriers, they connect with each other, and they learn from each other and they become better through that knowledge, through that connection. And you see Clovis learning from Arpix that the solution isn't always to just go in and chop everybody's head off, right? That she
Mhm.
learns some
Yeah.
restraint from him, and appreciates that, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
I believe so. And I think Arpix learns from her as well,
Hmm.
yes,
Yeah.
because there was one really amusing section where they're going along, and you hear we're getting Arpex's thoughts, and they're very philosophical and they're very
Hmm.
highbrow, and all of a sudden she just looks at him and says, "You're doing it again,"
yeah.
and, and he's like, "What?" And she's like, "Thinking too much."
Thinking. Hmm.
I can hear your brain grinding, and I think that's a lesson Like she has the lesson of sometimes you need to do something. You can't just think about it and not do anything. And of course, he has the opposite lesson on her. Sometimes you got to think before you
Mm.
act, you know. So it's a wonderful opposites attract kind of balance thing going on.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And species that in the beginning of this absolutely hated each other,
Mhm.
thought of each other as complete others,
Yeah,
as monsters, right? And the fact that you can have these relationships evolve through the course of the story, uh, it's very hopeful, actually. It's very beautiful in a sense, I think.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
Yeah. Thoughts on any of that, Marianne?
Uh, no, I just agree with both of you. I do think that uh, our picks tempers Clovis, like kind of shows or instill not instills, but like she kind of learns temperance with him, and then through her, he I don't know gets more in touch with his emotions because I feel that he's very sterile. You know, he kind of looks at things like logically, analytically, but when
hmm,
he's with Clovis, he does start to think more about the I don't know, emotional sides
Yes.
of the conflict that they're dealing with. So yeah, it's very much opposites attract. Another thing that was interesting. This is more to do when we were following Levira, Carlot, and who was the other one? Ute's daughter.
Yes, let's
That
move on to
section.
them, actually. Yolanda, Yolanda.
Yolanda,
yeah,
yes. One thing that stuck out to me is that we find out, they find Carlot in the past, because that was another thing in
Yeah.
the last book, because
right.
we remember there was that statue, and then like Arpix was looking at it and was like, wait a second, that looks like Carlot. Why
Right,
does it look like Carlot?
right.
So we find out, she became a queen long, long, long ago,
A ghost queen.
the
Yeah.
ghost queen.
That only the
But
king can
yeah,
see. Yeah.
and then we find out about the insect. What are the insect people again? The
Skier.
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 Skier,
Yeah,
yeah.
that they
Yeah,
were made by
but the Gunnar.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that was a
so
surprise. Yeah.
yeah, in the last book, in the book that broke the world, we see the Gunnar. They're basically enslaved. They're the downtrodden, and then we found out in book three that they were invaders. They were originally invaders to this world that they created the skier through very horrific means. And, they were attacking humans. And there's a part in the book where, like, everyone, Gunnar, human, Cannith, they were all like enslaving or hurting one another at one point in history. Like, no one was ever uh, solely the victim.
Yeah.
So, that idea that, like, all of the species involved in this story, have blood on their hands.
Mm,
Like,
yeah,
we can't, like, hold them. You can't hold a certain species like eternally accountable. Like history, when we go back far enough, will reveal, some very unpleasant truths. So
yeah,
yeah, it was very interesting seeing the Gunnar. You know, they're basically, you know, they're doing horrific scientific experiments on these creatures. I think in a way, to back in the Holocaust, you had those doctors who were
Yes.
doing those horrific, experiments on human beings,
Right.
Yeah, it's just like all the species were capable of horrible acts.
yeah,
Yep. Yep. Very, very well said, Marianne. And it's interesting that we do have one Gunnar represented in this story, and that's Kelka, who had been previously used by Mayland and now has become the master in a sense. Like she also entered into the heart of the library and learned, and she's become a much more compassionate individual. And she's the one when Owenald and the whole party come together. She's the one that brings about peace and says, "You can all hang out with me and I'll feed you, but
Mhm.
here's the rule: nobody's hurting anybody here, right?"
mm,
And she prevents even when even when Starval assassinates Owenald, and at first a lot of us are probably like, yes, and then she heals him. She essentially does not allow that to happen.
Mm.
She doesn't allow the violence. So she's really gone from, this vengeful figure
Yeah.
who's after Evar and Levira to a figure of almost a kind of a Buddha-like figure almost in here. So, what did you think of her role in this? Jared, you want to go first on that?
Uh, yeah, I was actually going to ask a question because I couldn't remember how she exactly got that way. I know she went through some sort of transformation at the end of the last book, but
Right.
I need a little refreshing there.
Well, she learned the truth that she had
Yeah,
been manipulated, and essentially, I think she did the same thing that Malin did, which is to disappear inside the library and live for hundreds of years, if not maybe even thousands, and learn
Mm.
in the process to how the library works, what it is. And she seemed to have learned a lot of wisdom in the course of that
yeah,
time. So she's probably lived a lot longer than we think, just, from the number of years that the other characters have gone through. And that's the weird thing about this is that time is so
My gosh.
different depending on where you are, and so that I mean that's a short, simple answer, I guess. But
yeah. And I was just wondering, and through that time, through that process, and finding the heart of the library, which requires some sort of, it seems like some sort of inner balance or peace or something like that, in order to access that and come out with this ability to manipulate, I guess, the blood of the library in order to create the food for the people and heal people and I found that fascinating because then it translates a little bit to Ivar, who
right,
then gets this blood of the library inside of him.
through
And,
Mayland actually, who's also able to manipulate the
Mm.
library. Yeah,
right, yeah. So, but Malin didn't seem to have that same inner peace that she does,
right.
and you wonder why Malin didn't get there. Was it because he didn't go through the same trauma that trauma and then revelation that Kelcha did,
Mm.
I think that's
or
part of it.
you
Yeah,
know, and and so that was kind of tricky to navigate at times in trying to figure out exactly what she um, what she was after. Because we knew what all the other characters were after. They had these definite goals, and and so she was kind of this uh, otherworldly arbitrator of sorts
uh-huh.
that acted as that, you know, that I don't know. There's a lot of figures in fantasy that come up and say, like almost like the Galadriel of like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
As a kind of a similar role. I could take the ring from you, but
Mm.
it might not be the best idea. And she's like, I could solve these things, but it might not be the best idea. And so that's kind of her archetype, I guess.
Yeah. Though I
Very
will say
interesting.
she does end up helping Levira and the others at the end to
Mm.
preserve the library in some state, right? She
Mhm.
she helps to prevent utter destruction, and so at least we can say that
That's right.
as far as that goes, that seems to be her side, if you will. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
But Yute's sacrifice, of course,
right?
ultimately really is just the problem solver there. But yeah, but getting back to Livera and Kalot, I almost forgot about Kalot's character
Yeah.
until I got reminded with this book, and I was like, oh wow, that's fascinating. I found her character fascinating as well because the way, because she kind of comes across as an airhead a little bit, you
Mhm.
know, but there is a certain wisdom to some of her the stuff she says and does, and um she's always like, when she was no longer a ghost, her first thing was just like, I want to eat something,
Eat something.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and
Completely
she's like,
understandable.
and one of the lines she said was, we might find a meal more easily somewhere less educational. And I thought that was actually a little deeper than just a funny line. I thought that it meant you can't be so focused on something without taking care of yourself, basically. you
Hmm.
know
Yeah.
and I thought that was a pretty interesting, nice little tidbit there.
Well, for sure. Yeah. So it was an interesting part. Why do you suppose that her king was able to see her? Why are there individuals peppered throughout the worlds who can see those who have entered their world as a past world for them who appear there as ghosts, where most people can't see these people, but there are few individuals who can. What is there? I don't know if there's an answer presented at all, but did you have thoughts on that? Did you wonder? I certainly found myself, why does that king see her,
That's a good
right? And
question.
he obviously sees Levira and
Mm.
Litar and Yolanda as well. So why is he? He doesn't seem that special otherwise, does he? And everyone thinks he's crazy because he talks to this guy, this non-existent queen. But he's had success, so they're ready to indulge his eccentricity, right? But
Um,
he's right.
I think there was actually a part in the book. I think it was Yolanda who proposed something. Like I'm kind of paraphrasing, but I think she mentioned that there's just some people who are randomly born that way, and then I think she also mentions that there might be some people who are kind of broken in a sense.
Yeah,
I think she mentioned something like that. I think it was hinted at the king. I think I think Carlotte mentioned like he did not have an easy life in the when he was young or something like that. But
wow.
I do remember that they did kind of wonder why certain people were able to see them. I don't know. I do feel that it's kind of well, it's kind of reminiscent of fantasy stories. Like there will always be like there are just some instances where you'll have characters that can kind of peek behind the veil, that can see the magical, that are more susceptible or just open to it, whether or not, they are just born that way or, they've gone through something themselves. Uh, I don't know. It is interesting because I was wondering like why that king in particular, but it was something more I kind of just accepted the fact that, there's just some people who are like this. There are just some
Yeah.
people who can kind of peek through time and space in a sense, that weak spot in time and space
Yeah, I
and
suspect you're onto
interact with it.
something with that observation about broken people, because that is definitely a Mark Lawrence thing. That his first trilogy is literally called the Broken Empire trilogy, but there are a lot of his characters are um, broken people in some way or other, and that makes them vulnerable in some ways, but also makes them gives them experience that allows them to see things that others don't, right? So perhaps that's the most logical answer, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe there's also something to do with, because the book that broke the world did crack the library,
Yeah,
and maybe that rifts, those cracks and those rifts, um, and being with they they have a a place, a, a penetration into the futures and the past.
yeah.
And Carlot, of course, was thrown to the past, um, as a ghost.
By
And
Levira to save her when the library was burning. Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah, and so maybe that is, the library enacting its will for somebody to be able to see Carlot. Um,
She needed it. She definitely needed someone at least to see her. I felt bad for her because if there was no one at all who she could talk to,
yeah.
yeah,
yeah, it'd
but
be horrible.
there was a mention in here somewhere about the library, uh, wanting things to happen, like
Mm.
the library being an active thing, and I wonder if that has something to do with it. I'm just throwing stuff against the wall here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think Ute and Carol mentioned that. Like Ute especially said that the library, we just walked through a portal. The library kind of took us here. I don't know why, but that's what we're here to find out. So yeah.
okay, yeah. Well, we've been dancing around them a bit, but it is time, I think, to get to the main duo here, and that would be Lavira and Evar. And I want to hear your thoughts on what happens to them. How did you feel about the resolution to their relationship? And yeah, I mean, it's in some ways heartbreaking and very melancholy, but in other ways beautiful, I think. And is Evar still a presence in her life at the end? What's your interpretation of that ending? So yeah, what do you want to say about Lavira and Evar and their character arcs in here, guys?
Uh, so I honestly, because I heard that this book was going to be a tearjerker, I was kind of expecting that I was predicting that actually both Livia and Avar were going to die. That's what I thought. Like they were going to die, but they technically live on in the book. Like I thought that's how it was going to be.
Uh-huh.
I was half right because apparently it's only Avar who that happened to. But to be fair, in the beginning of the book, where it was revealed that Mayland replaced his blood with that of the library,
Right.
I'm kind of like, yeah, you're marked for death at that point. Like I had a feeling. So
You saw it coming from the.
yeah, yeah. I was like, okay, we're gonna lose Avar, and I thought we were gonna also lose Elvira, but no, just him. Yeah, it's very bittersweet. I do appreciate that they got to reunite. You know, that one time before they were separated. But I do love that image at the end where, Livia is now an old woman. She's staying at that bookstore and she opens her book. And I love the image on the cover. It's it resembles a tumbleweed. And in the middle is like a figure of a Caneth walking towards her.
All the way back to the
That's
first book.
from the
Yeah.
first book. Yeah, she
That's
sees
wow. Yeah.
that tumbleweed in that same image, and she's wondering, oh, what could that mean? And it's hearkening, to the end. So yeah, it's really sweet that Avar. I think he lives on. He as long as the library is around, Avar is still living. He's just he's living within the library, even though it may be diluted. And yeah, when she opens that book, it is sort of like a reunion between the two of them. It may not be physical because he's not physically alive, but like
Mm.
in the heart, like they are together. So long as she opens that page and she reads, they're together. And even after she closes the book, they're still together. It's very bittersweet, but I think very fitting. And yeah, honestly, I was kind of preparing myself for something more gut wrenching, but I was satisfied with this. I was pretty satisfied with
Yeah.
this.
Probably good that you armored yourself that way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it is true, isn't it, that stories can unite us and reunite us with people
Yeah.
in some very special ways. But your thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah. No, I agree with most of that. I I also feel like it was a kind of like when you read something from your letters that your parents wrote to each other or something like that, and you
Mm.
get those memories flooding back, and her memories are a bit more, uh, there than than most people's, I think. Um, but it reminded me of that, and that then like that bit of sweetness you talked about. It, I think that's in full, uh, really, really poignant here. And um, yeah, I was geared. I guess you said armored up. I was armored up against the waterworks too because I was expecting a lot more, but I really really liked how he pulled it off, and I thought that was just very fitting. I grew to really love Lavera as a character, so I'm happy that she got to grow old and have
Mm.
a life and and but she also has I think she also has a closeness to Ivar that most people wouldn't have, and
Mm.
I think that is very sweet in and of itself. And so I was quite happy with that because she can live through the book. She can
Mm.
experience those things more viscerally than any of us could, you know. And so it's due to the magic of the library and stuff like that. So it's I thought it was a pretty powerful ending, and it spoke a lot from memory and remembrance of loved ones.
I appreciate the fact that Mark Lawrence set this up as a situation where Levira had a choice, that she could have stayed with Evar in that little
Mm.
bliss bubble, together and had her one true love in this, but the rest of the world would have fallen apart. And it's either have that or save the world. And she sacrifices her own
Yeah.
happiness in a sense there, uh,
Yeah.
and is given, in the end, an echo of what she might have had because she's able to open the book and feel his presence there. Maybe feel lost in that story in a way that goes beyond the way we get lost in a book,
Mm.
Hmm.
probably. Um,
Yeah.
but it's still not what she could have had with
Yeah.
him.
But that resonates also with Anne's decision to stay
Yes,
as well.
exactly,
And
exactly. That's a parallel there.
I
Yeah,
really like that connection, that parallel. Yeah.
yeah, well said. Yeah. So we're upset a little bit, but we're okay with the ending.
We're
We're not going to send Mark Lawrence our therapy bills.
no.
No.
Only
Okay.
if you want them.
I mean, he could use them and put them, on
Yeah.
display.
There you go.
Uh, but okay.
No,
No, I think it's just a beautiful story. It's a beautiful trilogy with some profound thematic work here. Just we talked about the knowledge part of this, but also the power, the way that Owenald and others abuse power and manipulate knowledge and use misinformation. The winners write history and all that business, and uh, just a brilliant look at humanity, what makes us tick, and our place in the universe in a way that I love it when I get that feeling, that sense of awe at the end of a really well told story that helps me to reflect on us. But yeah, I would say that this is a very important trilogy. It is very difficult to categorize in many respects, but just a great story. And I'm so glad that for me, he really stuck the landing here.
yeah, and that's important to me. I like it when authors stick the landing.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah. Any criticisms? We haven't been very critical. I mean, I've heard some people say they wish that books two and three were longer, which is
I'm,
kind of a
there's
compliment in a way, but also a criticism. Yeah.
yeah, I remember feeling the same way because book one is so thick.
Yeah.
And then you see book two and you see book three, which they're basically the same size. So I was kind of worried when I saw that book three was just this. I was like, oh my gosh, will
Yeah.
this be enough? Will this be enough to, conclude everyone's journeys? But no, I think we got a conclusion basically to everyone. Uh, Even characters like I didn't expect to, like for instance, Salamanda
Yeah.
and Jella. Like we also, Lawrence handles them as well. And yeah, I feel like we got a good conclusion. And I was once again, as I was reading, I was wondering, how is he gonna do it? Because he's not only playing with time and alternate worlds, he's
Yeah.
playing with alternate multi dimensions.
Yeah.
So it's like as soon as that group, like Arpix, Clovis, Malin, they stepped to the portal and they were like they all diverged into different like multiverses, and I'm like, okay, everything just got even infinitely more complicated. How are we gonna fix everything?
Right.
Part of me was wondering, like, is he just gonna implode this universe and we're just gonna get a big bang and start all
Just
over? I was
blow it all up.
genuine. Yeah. Is this world gonna like nuke it, the universe is gonna nuke itself and we're just gonna start, fresh? I was genuinely playing with that idea. It's like, is that what he's gonna do?
Huh.
But I do like how he brought us to the center of the library, which is the beginning. The stones with the first symbols for
Yeah,
communication. I really like that. I really like that image.
that was brilliant.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
I think he did what he wanted to do, actually. And you talked to Marianne in the beginning about the pacing, and he wanted it to be frenetic. He wanted it to feel
Yeah.
chaotic. And I think that a longer book would have felt less chaotic, would have felt less frenetic. And I think he did what he wanted to do there. And I think it was a good choice in this
Yeah.
case.
I mean, 'cause the book that wouldn't burn was such a beautiful setup to all this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think that warranted its greater length than these last two books because you needed all that to get to where we could get to the frenetic part of it,
Yeah.
and
The world building, the character
yeah,
investments, all that stuff was
yep,
achieved in that first book. And then came the action, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, yep,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's. I mean, it's kind of funny that we're saying that these books are short, but if you look in the supermarket,
I mean, by fantasy terms.
by
Where
fantasy terms, it's
yeah.
short, but that's where he's defying the fantasy genre, I guess. So,
All right. Well, I want to thank you too, because you have really enriched my appreciation for this story. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely, and I'm so glad we had the opportunity to do this. And also, thank you to Mark Lawrence. If you watch this, you did a tremendous job with this trilogy. It is officially my favorite Mark Lawrence trilogy that I've read so far. And I loved the other three trilogies that I have read, and I need to read all the others that are out there before another one comes out. Although the way he's pretty, um, I guess, prolific, if you will. Probably he's got another one ready to start publishing. I think even as we speak, but I'll catch up to you, Mark, someday. I will. I can read faster than you can write. I'm pretty sure. So, but thank you both. This was really wonderful.
thank you, Philip. Thank you, Marianne. This was, yeah, you're right. It was really wonderful. I totally agree, and it's probably going to be one of my top five of the year, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
it's definitely going to be in my top 10.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be in my year-end favorites. Definitely what I was hoping for, and many unexpected things as well. So all right. Well, thank you everybody who got to the end of this video, and we'll see you next time.